ACT Science Tutoring Packet Answer Key, Part 4. So, last part, we've got conflicting viewpoints, which can be Scientist 1 and Scientist 2 discussing something historical and what they think is happening, or it can be an experiment being run and 3 or 4 kids saying, I think this happened, I think that happened, I think that happened. And your job is not to bring in your prior knowledge. Clearly the Earth is round. We know that. Well, just read the arguments and assess them. This will probably be your longest section, so be prepared for it to take a little bit more. These are the things you're going to have to do. Interpret, strengths and weaknesses. Scientist 1 would agree with this. Scientist 1 would disagree. Scientist 2 would agree. That sort of thing. So just be careful. It kicks up into high gear when you're not ready for it. These are the types of science you'll see, and we talked a little bit about this earlier. They're talking about rock, soil, earth. It's geologists, and I bring this up because I have seen that. Which one of these would be the type of scientist that would be arguing this? Oh, they're zoologists or whatever. So again, pause and check it out. So, Fighting Scientist Drill 1. Make sure you read the first opener. You might be in a rush to jump to what Scientist 1 or Scientist 2 is saying, but make sure you read it. It's pretty critical. How did the continents take on their current shape? Read number 1. Read number 2. So, which of the following statements is the most inconsistent with the beliefs of Scientist 1? Well, Scientist 1 thinks that they're floating around. So, one's part of a huge landmass. Now, he's cool with that. They started that way and they floated. Continents split up and drifted apart. He's cool with that. Ocean basins have not changed for millions of years. He's not cool with that. Says, no, they've changed very slowly. The other guy says they haven't. Geology evidence shows similarities. No, he's also cool with that. He thinks that's accurate. 2. Science studied fossils along the coast of South America and Africa. Hey, they're the same. Looks like Scientist 1 is right. What would Scientist 2 say? He'd probably say something about soil and climate conditions are the same. It's not really surprising that you got the same thing there. Seems kind of obvious that you would. So he's going to make that as an excuse. A new zone of tectonic activity has been discovered in Eurasia. It shows geological evidence of having been there for several thousand years. Which scientist is supported by this? Well, Scientist 1 says it happens along the edges, and that's how the continents move, things like that. So it's not Scientist 1. Scientist 2 is going to say, yeehaw, I look like I'm right. It doesn't happen just along the land masses, along the edges. It's not along the ocean basin. Sometimes it just happens out in the middle of nowhere. So he's happy with that. And I love this. Granite. Did we ever say anything about granite? It's just weird. Oh, here we go. Both scientists are experts in plate tectonics. They're geologists. And now the least favorite question on the test, 1, 2, and 3. Which of the following would be supported by both scientists? Tectonic activity has always been a factor. Yeah, they're going to both agree with that. Continent are fixed. No, 2 will say that, but not 1. Continent drift occurred, I don't know when they're getting into this. 1 doesn't even believe in drift, so it's just 1 only. Drill number 2. How did life on Earth originate? 2 differing views are presented. Read hypothesis 1. Read hypothesis 2. Love the primordial soup. Just love that name. So we go. Which of the following can be used to support hypothesis 2? So you really need to know what you're talking about here. You can't just jump in and be like, oh, this is easy. Atmospheric conditions were too unstable to support the gases essential. That helps number 2. Organic molecules are able to thrive. Don't care. Origin of life began in the primordial soup. No, that helps number 1. Atmosphere contained methane, ammonium, hydrogen, and water. That helps number 1 too, because that's what he started with. To accept hypothesis 1, one must assume that Earth was bombarded by meteors. That doesn't really pop up. The conditions in the glass were analogous to the conditions on primeval Earth. Yeah, that makes sense. Proteins are don't really need to agree with that. It might have happened anyway, or is not integral to hypothesis 1. Earth lacked hydrogen. I don't even know where to go with that one. Just weird. Which of the following shows how, according to hypothesis 1, the building blocks of life were formed? And now notice that if you had really spent a lot of time studying hypothesis 2, you didn't need to. I mean, it was just one question up top, and it was a fairly general question. So, this is, if you just skimmed it, got the general idea, you just saved some time. However, if you skimmed hypothesis 1, you'd probably go back and read it more carefully, which is fine. Skimming saves you time. Reading more carefully is where you want to spend your time where you need to spend it. So which of the following is the building blocks of life? So if you go back and read it, he starts with his methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and water. And he takes that places. So that's the only one that's got that. So 3 is A. You could say, well, it's primordial soup, that's all that. And then proteins, amino acids. No, they, primeval. That's funny, I gotta fix that. Primordial soup. They actually came from the other stuff. So, one more drill on fighting scientists. Will Earth experience another science age? Another ice age. So read hypothesis 1. Read hypothesis 2. Looks like hypothesis 1 is, oh, absolutely not. Hypothesis 2 looks like, hey, it's possible. So which of the following discoveries would most clearly favor hypothesis 2? Hypothesis 2 being, hey, it's possible. A lot of pollution in the air, more the temperature drops. Yeah, that ties in with what he said. Canada had more snowfall this year. Doesn't really mean squat. When snow falls, it sticks to the ground. Yeah, no kidding. Earth bodies of water becoming more polluted. He didn't really get into that. He talked about air pollution causing problems. Which of the following statements is the strongest argument a supporter of 2 would use to counter 1? Temperature around polar regions fluctuates. Precipitation rate has been increasing in the Swiss Alps. I mean, whenever they get specific, unless it's been mentioned, which they didn't mention the polar caps, when they say Swiss Alps, you know that you're off beat. They're just, I don't know what they're even talking about there. Just because ideal conditions are rare doesn't mean that they won't happen. Yeah, they said it'd be rare, but hey, it could happen. Temperature North Pole specific. We never talked about specific stuff except for the 5 degrees, so 2 degrees doesn't help us. If hypothesis 2 is correct and glaciation can take place, what region must be affected? What regions would be most affected? Well, hypothesis 2 talked about pollution, and I believe they talked about the polar regions. So you're looking at C. It didn't say anything about humid regions. According to hypothesis 2, what conditions could cause glaciation? So notice again, skim 1, read 2 in detail. You didn't know that going in. I don't like looking at the questions first, by the way, if you're thinking that. I skim them, look at the questions, and go from there. What conditions could cause glaciation? Low levels of no. High levels of pollution, yes. Blanket effect, blocked out sun, yes. Lack of snowfall, no. 5 degree center drop. Now, that might be possible. J is not a horrible answer, but he didn't talk about the 5 degrees. The other guy did. So 4 is going to be G. And examples that I am just going to post answers. I like this one because it gets you 4 students involved. So read your experiment, vinegar, yada, yada, yada. They place it in that apparatus. This is 68.1. That's kind of important. Hard to read all this. Sorry. And then we go back up to what did student 1, 2, and 3 say? Student 1. Student 2. And student 3. So again, I'm just going to put some answers up there. I'm going to put the 27 and 28 answers up, even though I have more answers below. All right, and one more example before we call it a day. Comets, complex stuff.
So they've got a pretty big intro. Make sure you're on top of it. Scientist B you can read in a second. Lovely little picture, how the comets work. So here's Scientist A. Short period comets, yada yada. Hopefully you had that paused. And here's Scientist B. I love that. The KB does not exist. Just you people are idiots. It's a nice little feel he's got going there. And answers. Oops. And that's about it. Hopefully you found this helpful. Best of luck studying for the ACT. You can go through this again and pause it and reread things. Hope it works for you. Good luck.